Peace, everyone, and welcome to this month's live critique. I have a lot of lovely pieces of artwork to go through today, so welcome. And if this happened to be your first time to one of the live critique streams, I do this the first Friday of every month, so make sure you join the art club, join the Facebook group. I post the thread in the Facebook group, but you can also join the Discord and post your monthly submissions there as well. So anybody is welcome to submit artwork for the live critique. Hey there, Claire, Cherry, Susan. Good to see you. Up first, we have a project that Linda finished, uh, just last minute submission. So it just happens to be the first one. But she did the AI portrait project that we colored pencil project that we did a little while ago, and you did really good here, Linda. This is definitely one of your strongest colored pencil portraits that I can remember. Really good colors. Like just about everything on this turned out really great, and there's not really a whole lot for me to critique here because you did do a very good job. A couple of the things that do stand out uh, is, solid coverage, really good. Like, I love the pink that's coming in here on the skin, the pink around the eyes. Really good colors. I love this little bit of pink showing up in the skin over here in the shadows. These transition pinks as well. Very important to make that skin look alive. Uh, One of the unique things about this project is that the skin didn't have a lot of vibrancy in it in the reference photo. And I actually, that appealed to me, which is why I chose to do the portrait. I really liked that almost porcelain skin that looks fake in a way, but has just the right amount of saturation and red that it looks alive. And so it sort of reminds me of like those porcelain dolls that have like the just the smooth skin and then they're painted, have that like tint of red or whatnot. And so I really the skin tone in this portrait really appealed to me, and I think that you captured those colors really nicely. I also like the subtle highlight here on the forehead and on the center of the neck, a little bit on the chin, right here underneath the nose, so that upper lip part. All of those little subtle highlights um, add just the right amount of dimension to the portrait. So I really think that you got those colors really well done. Just fantastic. The hair also looks good. The flyaways look like they may have given you a little bit of trouble. Flyaways are tricky because there's that flicking motion that requires a bit of confidence and practice to get the flyaways to look more natural. Here, some of them are just a little bit rigid, and that just that small amount of rigidness and that hesitancy in bringing those curves around fast and smooth. That's the separation between like capturing that natural flow of a flyaway versus something that looks a little bit too drawn on. And here yours just has a little bit of that hesitancy in them that makes them feel more drawn as opposed to just naturally flowing. By the way, hello, Linda, Diane, and Margaret. Good to see you. Um, Now, the other thing that I wanted to touch on is, the eyes are almost always the most important part of a portrait. And here you can, if I just zoom in a little bit, you can see that this eye is a little bit more narrow than the other eye. This eye is open a bit wider, and this partially due to the portrait. When we started the portrait, I pointed out that in the reference photo there was a few mistakes. The the AI got the eyes a little bit off. One of the characteristics of AI portraits is that the pupils tend to be oval and or off center. That's one of the very common mistakes. The other mistake is that the irises tend to point in slightly different directions. Here, yours is kind of close. This eye is looking very much towards the camera. The pupil does feel like its direction is this way more. Sorry, this way. This eye, however, points a little bit more this way. And so the iris actually needs to shift over just the smallest amount in order to follow this, or vice versa. You can either shift this iris over to the left to match this eye, or you can shift this one to the right to match this eye. So you sort of have a little bit of squishiness on this upper eyelid on her left eye here. And so her left eye looks visibly smaller than her right eye, and then also the iris and pupil are just slightly off center. So the eyes could have been a little bit more symmetrical and pointed in the correct direction. It's a really finicky thing with portraits to get this correct. It's something that you definitely want to pay close attention to in your original line art, just to make sure those eyes are lined up nicely. Um, and then also, I just wanted to remark you did a really good job on the ear. So the other part of the project that the reference photo was that the ear was really weird, and so I supplemented my ear with a character reference, and then I just reused the colors. I think that you nailed the ear. This probably one of the more difficult parts of correction in the portrait was just how sort of strange the ear looked in the reference photo. So I think you nailed the ear. It looks really, really good. The lips are good as well. The upper lip looks a little thick though, in comparison not only to the reference but what you would expect to see. Generally, the upper lip is not larger explicitly than the lower lip. They can be symmetrical in size, but almost consistently it's rather unlikely naturally that the upper lip is thicker than the bottom lip, and here your upper lip is just a little bit thicker. And I think it would look better reversed. Usually a thicker bottom lip looks better than a thicker upper lip. But other than that, you did fantastic job on this project. Very, very impressed. Beautiful gold colors also. All right, Linda's next project is this lovely piece of work here. And this was the reference that was in Discord. If anybody's curious of where this project came from, there is the reference in the Discord channel if you want to check it out, and there's a couple of them that are similar to this. It was like two, I think, that had like a violin and various still life setups with like candles and flowers and stuff. So very detailed piece, lots of things going on, and I think that once again you really captured like the light here, especially the light coming from the candles. So many people mess up things like candles because just the same way we associate the color yellow with the sun, the actual color is much closer to white, if not pure white. And it is the color and value surrounding the physical light source that generates the color of light. And so here you've really, really got that perfect yellow to orange shift in the candles that really make them look like they're glowing. It genuinely looks like candlelight. And you capture that lighting throughout the project with this high contrast separation from the shadow and light. The reflections on the violin, the small details on the music paper here, little pocket watch, all of the flowers, the texture of the wood grain, like you can see the wood grain here and the reflections, really, really well done. I think if there's not a whole lot I would suggest correcting. The one thing that I would suggest correcting is the thickness of the strings of the violin. You notice the high contrast, almost pure white shine from the violin strings really stands out against the darker colors that surround it. And I think if they were thinner, you could get away with that high contrast. But here they look much thicker than violin strings actually are, you know? And because of that thickness and the contrast, they stand out and they almost distract from the other parts of the image because they're aside from the candlelight, they're kind of the highest contrasted object in the scene, and it just pulls your eyes. The other thing is that they're directional lines. Directional lines also have a tendency to your eyes follow lines. And here are the lines pointing down to the left, which I know that they do in the reference photo, but because of their boldness, your eyes just sort of fall down into the left. So I think the strings should be less prominent and less obvious, even if they show up like that in the reference photo. For sure, they should be thinner though. But yeah, again, you totally nailed this project and it looks really good. All right, up next is Dorothy, lovely pastel piece. Um, if I didn't know any better, I'd say this was also one of your projects, Linda. You've had plenty of scenes, not exactly like this, but just sort of vacation type photos that just have this feel to them. Uh, but no, this is Dorothy pastel piece, which I always this is pastel piece, right? To me, it actually is convincingly colored pencil, but maybe I hope I didn't write pastel where it wasn't supposed to be. Sometimes when I can't tell the medium, I just double check on the original post. But let's just move on with it being pastel. How do I make the strings thinner? Uh, so imagine the strings are just a highlight, right? So you take the color that surrounds them and you just edge it in ever so slightly. Uh, I would, since you're working with colored pencils, it's totally safe to use a ruler. So if you need to, just grab a ruler, make and like use the ruler to help edge it in nice and straightly. And then you'll get that crisp straight line that the strings have. And then you'll also gradually be able to make them thinner. Hello, Jonah. Good to see you from Australia. It's getting pretty late there in Australia, isn't it? Good evening. Anyway, so Dorothy, this project is really, really good. Beautiful water texture, beautiful texture overall. Like this, I think this is a rock. It's hard to tell. Is that a rock or is that just part of the tree? It almost looks like a rock, but I guess that is just another part of the section of the tree, right? The different color makes it hard to discern whether or not it's a rock or a tree. But really, really great texture here. I like to see all the texture. Now, the texture does break realism a little bit in the branches here. The texture feels kind of stretched out and artificial, but that doesn't inherently make it wrong or anything. I'm just saying that if you wanted to approach realism, what it appears from my perspective is that you did the texture while simultaneously. Okay, it's pastel pencils. Okay, that makes more sense. Oh no, it is pastel pencils. Okay, yeah, it's pastel. Yeah. Anyways, so for the texture of these trees, this area looks good. This texture looks realistic. But the tree branches here, especially like this section right there, this section and this section and this section here, it looks like you applied the texture while simultaneously coloring it in, where you don't want to do that. Anytime you're dealing with texture, do your best to isolate texture from the base layers. So if the tree is generally this color, right? It's like, say it's like this kind of grayish color. Hold on, I shouldn't draw on this layer. So say it's generally this color, and then you have these darker values. Well, save those darker values, and then once you establish your gradient or whatever is happening below the texture. So say you have a subtle gradient between these two colors. I'm just trying to, a little bit of a gradient, right? You have this gradient happening between these two colors, and maybe you even have a darker color down here, right? So you have this gradient. Well, with just the gradient, you're not dealing with texture at this stage. You're dealing with the colors that create the base of the image. And then once you have that, you take your dark color and then you come in and you start adding the texture over top of the gradient. And by isolating the gradient below, you've already defined the range of value. And then the only thing that you have to do uh, for the rest of the tree is add that texture. And the texture comes in a pattern. Now, that pattern can sometimes be non-pattern patterns, or it can be a literal pattern. So like this part of the tree here, the non-pattern pattern of tree bark can fall into a number of categories. But this part of the tree, you could think of being slight horizontal lines that go like that, and then vertical lines. Let me just grab this color. So this part of the tree, you would have, here's the tree trunk. You would have these breaks of horizontal lines that sort of do this. And this is part of, obviously these lines themselves don't create a pattern, but it's a non-pattern pattern. So the randomized horizontal lines don't create a perfect pattern, but cumulatively it is a pattern. And then you have the vertical lines. So you have this sort of intersection of lines that creates a non-pattern pattern, and they don't have to be perfect and they don't have to be parallel because they're not a pattern. They're not a true pattern, but this is the texture of the tree bark in this area right here. And so you can utilize the first base layer, the gradient, and then you can create the pattern on top. And here, all of this looks like that's what you did. You sort of applied like the base color and then you did the pattern on top. But then when it comes up to the tree branches, especially this one right here, in this section right here, it sort of feels like you left that strategy behind because maybe you just wanted to finish these little branches and whatever, and you sort of just rushed ahead. You sort of lost that initial patience. Like you did all of this part of the tree and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of drawing this tree bark. And so you sort of scribbled in these last little bits. Unfortunate, unfortunately, that happened because you have all this lovely detail and texture, especially like in this part. And then up here, you sort of just quit. And so a non-artist can look at that and be like, what happened to these other tree branches? All this part of the tree looks, really cool and realistic and textured, but then the rest of the tree branches just sort of feel scribbled in, like last minute kind of thing. And so you got to be careful with that. If you change the style of your artwork in the middle of the project, you don't have to be an artist to recognize it. So non-artist eyes will pick up on that. And so you want to make sure that if you're going, you need to know what your goal is. If your goal is like photorealism, then every part of the project needs to be done strategically to accomplish that. If you do just part of the tree photorealism, not to imply that you did here, but then the other parts must be photorealism in order for everything to be photorealism. Otherwise, it's a blend of quality. That's what it ends up looking like, a blend of quality as opposed to a solid look. Now, if you did everything a little bit looser and a little bit quicker, then everything matches and it doesn't look like a loss of quality. It just looks like a style. Um, yeah. So, anyways, the that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. The sky, clouds, water, textures look really good. The last thing that I want to talk about is just the overall establishment of light. So, in the reference photo here, we can clearly see see this shape on the chair. We can see that shadow. This is a shadow, the backside of the chair. In comparison, you can tell, like, look at this color here. That's the shadow. Here's the light of the same object. This wood on the back is not different. It's just a shadow, and that's why it appears significantly darker. You can also see the shadow on the ground. So you can tell from the shadow on the ground that the light source is like straight down. It's like noon. However, you can tell by the soft lines and also the clouds in the background that this is not direct sunlight. If this was direct sunlight, you would also see the cast shadow from the tree that is overhanging um, these chairs here. You would see the outline and the speckling of the trees. So there'd be all of this would be in shadow because the sunlight's coming straight down, but it's overcast, and the tree would have a cast shadow on the ground, but we don't have that because it's overcast. And so, regardless of that, we still have these distinct shadows on the backs of the chairs, which your chairs don't have. You don't have that distinction. You have the soft shadows, but you lost the distinct shape that defines the three-dimensional quality of the chairs. So if I just take my lasso tool here and I'm just going to trace the back of your chairs. Now the top part is darker, but the shape, you lost the shape regardless. So I'm going to trace that and trace this one over here. You have a little bit of that shape, but you didn't define it well enough. You don't have that distinct value that separates the light from the dark. And that distinctness is what is going to give your chairs more of that three-dimensional look. So I'm just going to color in that shape. And then let's do multiply and change the opacity. So all I did was add those shapes and look how much, first off, look how much more the chairs pull focus because it's sort of like a central spot, sort of storytelling. Um, just by enhancing those dominant shapes. You can see now, if you look at the reference photo and look at the artwork, you can see how distinct the chairs are in comparison to how they were. So this is how they were, and here the tree is dominating the value range. The tree has the darkest value. So your eyes are automatically pulled to this area of the tree. Everybody's looking right here because it's like the darkest spot on the paper. And it's like what's happening in the tree. Like it has the most texture, it has the most detail all in this area. It has the darkest value. It's the most contrasted area of the artwork. Whereas I don't think the tree is meant to be the story here. I think the seats are. And so you need to compensate with those values to pull the viewer's eye to where the story is supposed to be happening. Because I don't think the tree is the story here. Um, Aside from that, you did a really good job, Dorothy. Thank you for the submission. Up next is Margaret, and she did the Thomas Kincaid project. We did this one a while ago. I don't think we did. It wasn't last year, was it? Wasn't it like 2 years ago? Feels like a while. Feels like a while. And you did a good job here, Margaret. The I'm going to cover the same things that I just covered with Dorothy's project, and that was that contrast, right? The establishment of light. See, uh, Thomas Kincaid is considered a master of painting light. Like he's one of the most modern examples of somebody that paints beautiful light. And here in this scene, the light source is this very soft, colorful sunset happening through this area here. And so, what we should expect is the lightest values coming from this spot. And because the light source is over here, everything that is not facing that direction should be in shadow. And so, if I take the shapes of this space, for instance, the left side of the manor. So I'm just going to take the left side here. I'm going to take a little bit of this side here. I believe this was curved, so it's like here, kind of. Um, Obviously, this part of the roof is not going to be as bright as you have it. So something like that. And then, of course, the entire bridge, right? The entire bridge, this part is all in shadow. Maybe a little less here, but still. This part of the bridge, I crisscrossed that line. I shouldn't have done that. These shadows sort of bend a little bit with the light as you have it. But now, again, I'm just going to take that dark color. I'm going to change it to multiply and change the opacity. And I'm just going to create that separation. Let's maybe even darken it, right? So now, just by having those shapes, it makes everything appear much more three-dimensional because now we're pushing the we're pushing the light in a direction. Some of the shadows that you've created establish a semblance of light, like you're starting to tell the story of what the light is doing, but none of your shadows are obvious enough for our minds to register exactly where the light is coming from. September 15th, 2021. Wow. Yeah, so it's been almost 2 years. It's pretty wild. Um, but anyways, so this is part of that, establishing strong light. And this is why in the monthly masteries, I stress over and over and over again, and I have been for a year and a half now with the monthly masteries. Since we just finished up monthly mastery 19, that means over a year and a half, you know, 19 months of talking about separating light from shadow. And so here, if had you just ignored the texture, ignored the details, and instead focused on the big shape of light versus shadow, I think that you would have massively improved just the three-dimensional look of this project. So real quick, here's the before, and then here's the after. Either way, you created a beautiful piece of work, and you should be very proud. Great colors in the water, nice separation of details, great brick texture, house texture, all of the stuff. You've done all of the stuff really well, but you left out the light. And so just try to think about that the next time you're doing a scene like this in any capacity. Try to think more before you even apply color. Just try to think more about what is the shadow and what is the light, and how does it convey that message? Where's the separation, and where do I need to keep this in mind? Because anytime you're filling part of a piece in, so say you are working on the bridge, right? You want to think, okay, am I working in shadow right now? Am I working in light? And if you're working in shadow, you have to always constantly double check and be like, am I am I applying this color dark enough? Like, are these values dark enough so that it will read as a shadow, or is it too light? And in this case, I think you're just too light, but still a beautiful piece. All right, up next is Cherry, and she had this lovely piece of work. Um, Cherry, you're in chat, aren't you? Yeah. Where is this reference photo from? I'm curious because this is obviously a composite. Somebody took like this lady with a white dress and superimposed it on this really nice long um, long exposure shot of a waterfall. If you're ever wondering if you're near a waterfall or moving water in general, if you want this smooth, silky look to the water, the secret to take photographs like that is a longer exposure time. So you take like a 1, 2, 3 second long exposure, um, then that's how you get that silky looking water. Oh, this is one of Chrissy's projects. Oh, very cool. Yeah, it looks very Chrissy like. I that was my initial thought, actually. All right, so let's talk about execution. Um, I think the colors are very good. You added a little bit more of a teal, like a warmer blue, a little bit more of a warmer blue than the slightly cooler blue. Um, I think that the water here looks good. The smoothness of the waterfall looks good. The lines are a little squiggly up here. See, these are like very straight, very smooth, and that's that long exposure. The mist, the mist texture, very good. The grassy, like this texture, very lovely. Yeah, I mean, it looks really, really good. The grass up close, it's just phenomenally good. Like this texture is perfect. It's perfect. It really is. This whole part of the project, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you started here with maximum uh, patience, and you just meticulously put in every single piece of grass just perfectly. The long grasses that come up, the little crisscrosses, and all of that natural looking texture, the grass, you did the grass here better than the photograph. Like, that's how good this grass is. Even the texture on the rock is very natural looking with the good colors, good pattern. Like, this is a perfect example of like a non-pattern pattern because you've taken the texture that the rock creates and superimposed it on your shapes and values and gradients, and then you got just the right amount of texture for it to read as a rock. So it looks very natural and it looks very good. Um, where I think things sort of dropped off just a little bit is in the sky. Now, when I originally saw your artwork, um I didn't look at the reference right away. I looked at your drawing here. Um and the sky threw me off. Like, these shapes, I was like, what is going on? Like, what is this weird shape going on here? I was thrown off by the sky when I looked at your just the project without the context of the reference. And there was two things that uh, came to mind when I saw the sky. The first was these sort of odd shapes. I was like, those shapes don't look like natural clouds. Clearly, the color um, suggests a sunset. The colors very much suggest a sunset. And the color orange is not bad in any way because it's a very good complement to these teals. You have these nice teals. Sorry, I need to make a layer here. You have these nice teal colors, and this orange is really, really good for that contrasting complement. And but then I noticed this color. I was like, what is this color? Because this is like more lavender, more purple, and a lot less of this. Like all of these colors are these green and teals, like these green and teal colors, which are great in contrast to the orange and the yellows. But this lavender color, the problem with this lavender color is that it doesn't exist anywhere else. So if the sky is this lavender color, then why would the water be this blue? Because the water is reflecting the color of the sky. You see, the reason water appears blue is because the all the colors of the sky comes down, and the only colors reflected are blue. So you have it, water absorbs the red, and so you'll get like blue and some green. And here you have the red of the sky within the purple because purple is blue and red. And so you come down and the color shifts. So all of the blue that occurs on the bottom half of this scene, it doesn't happen in the sky. And so there's this disconnect between the color harmony. And so the purple in the sky just doesn't work because there's no purple in the landscape. Um, and so you want to be very careful introducing this sort of extra color into a scene, especially if the scene is a sky plus water, because you'd never have a sky that is dramatically different color than the water. Now, when it comes to the shapes, I can definitely see where you got the shapes. I can see that these shapes are like just blobs. Just they feel like just arbitrary blobs in the sky. And so here you have to ask yourself, okay, does if you just look at the reference, so if I just look at the reference, when when you use a reference, don't ever feel like you have to use the reference exactly the way that it is. There's certain things that you may just want to change. And so if I were to do this, I would be like, I don't know about the sky, the way that it appears with the blobs, because as a photo, it looks fine. Like the blobs read as clouds. You can sort of see that it's clouds, but I have to think of replication. Like I'm not taking a photograph of a photograph. I'm replicating that in a specific medium. And so if I look at that sky and I'm like, well, I'm going to do this project in pastel, am I going to get that effect? Is it possible to get that effect with pastel? And I would confidently say no, because first off, blue and orange are complements and very tricky to softly transition from a very vibrant orange into a muted blue. It's tricky because anytime you gradient, every time you create a gradient through complementary colors, whether it's red and green or yellow and purple or orange and blue, the gradient has to go through gray. That's how you do it. But that's not easy to do. With pastels, the pigment will spread, and you risk getting a little muddy. Now, a good example of getting a little muddy, even in the even in the photograph, is look at this brown. Um, that's that's in the sky. That is because complementary colors, such as this blue and this orange, they make mud. And that's why you get brown right here. This is like brown. Complementary colors always mix to brown. That's where the muddiness comes from. So the sky is very tricky in this regard. And so I would have probably approached the sky in a different way than attempting the blobs. That's obviously a personal choice, but it's something that you want to think about. Anytime you're following a reference photo, just try to remember that you're doing a translation. If you want to do photorealism, like more power to you. It's going to take a tremendous amount of time to do photorealism, where you match every pixel of the image. Like that's another story in itself. Okay, so you don't approach photorealism the same way you would approach something a little bit more stylistic. And so you could certainly replicate that sky photorealistically in your artwork. But if you don't want to put in that time because it's not the style that you're going for, you're not going for photorealism, then you have to ask yourself, okay, what's the approach with this sky? Will it replicate? Will it replicate well? Will it translate well into artwork? I don't think if you were to isolate just the sky, right? There's no woman, there's no mountains, nothing. It's just the sky. Not even the photograph would register as a sky. Not even the photograph registers as sky because it looks nebulous. It looks like just sort of plain shapes. And there's two reasons that happens. The first reason is there's minimum information. You don't know what extends beyond. The only reason we recognize it as a sky is because the mountains. The whole context of where those colors are, we register that as the sky. But take away all that stuff, nobody's going to look at that and be like, "Oh, that's a sunset. Those are clouds." No, they don't look like clouds. They don't naturally have the the natural tendency of colors that clouds have, even in sunset. They're very artistic in nature, and so you want to be cautious attempting to replicate something that already translates very difficult, like even as a photo. So just really, really minute points to keep in the back of your mind. But I think that you did a really good job on the project overall. Very good job. Yes, indeed. All right. Up next is Megan, and Megan's got a couple projects here. First up is Golem, Smeagol. I don't know which one. They're both the same, right? Probably Smeagol, right? Smeagol's like the friendlier one. Golem's the creep. His alter his alter ego. Now, getting back to shadows once more, thinking about shadows and light, separating, finding those separations, because we can very, very easily just take, okay, so I'm going to draw this shadow shape, comes down here, his arm, up the clavicle, sort of here, and then down up the neck like this, and then across the chin. You have a little bit of the shadow information put in here, Megan, but not quite. Not quite. And then the eye, you totally skipped the shadow across the eye, underneath the eyebrows, this part, up the forehead, around the back of the head, and then everything. So everything is just in shadow from this point forward. So all of that, and boom. And then I can just take this color, put that in, deselect, and multiply, and change the opacity. Bam. Immediately, the light source, it's like the light bulb literally turned on. Oh, hello, by the way, Chandri. I was in a really long tirade there and didn't get a chance to say hello. Also, B, I see you as well. Yeah, so just immediately the light turns on. Notice that I just applied just an arbitrary color, like whatever color was on my palette, some dark brown, right? It doesn't even matter the color. Like in the reference photo, we can see that it's much more green. It's much more green. Like just look how green that is. Maybe if I just turn this green. Yeah, there we go. So I just took the green, which was this green here. Why is that so light? Oh, wait, why is that so light? Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. There. So very green shadows, super green. Um, and I had brown on here. So it didn't matter that the color was totally different, not even remotely green. What mattered is that the value. I've mentioned it for a very long time now that the most important part of your artwork is value. So how dark you have your darks and how light you have your lights. Matching those values across the objects is so much more important than the color you pick because you can make good monochromatic artwork. You don't need color at all. You don't ever need to use color to make beautiful artwork. There's an infinite array of examples of black and white monochromatic artwork that look amazing and there's no color involved. Why do they look amazing? It has nothing to do with the lack of color. It has everything to do with the values. You find a black and white image that is low contrast and you will find a very uninteresting piece of artwork. It's very rare to create interesting artwork while simultaneously having low value or a low contrast, I mean. And just to remind everybody the difference between contrast and value. Value is a measurement of light and dark for a single color, for just one single color. Contrast is the spectrum of values that exist in an entire piece of work or an object. So, contrast is the difference between the brightest values and the darkest values. And that uh, comparison between the two, or the difference between the lightest and the darkest, that creates contrast. The the further you get on the spectrum of light and darkness, that is what creates more contrast. So just to reiterate, so here is gray, and here is another gray. Clearly, two distinct values. This gray is darker than this gray. However, if this was artwork, which clearly is not, this is low contrast because the difference between the darkest value and the lightest value is not that great. Now let's take a different example. I'm going to use the same gray, and I'm just going to darken this one. So I'm just going to take this down a couple steps. This is more contrast because the value difference between the dark and the light is significantly different than these. These two colors are going to create more dynamic artwork and better looking artwork simply because the contrast between the two is more. So, yeah, that's my discussion on contrast versus value. And so here, just getting the contrast between the light and the shadow immediately makes Smeagol here look better because you've established the light, which inherently establishes the three-dimensional quality of the project. And then on top of that, beyond talking about light, let me just talk about the background. So the background, I feel like you put way too much emphasis on the background. Now, granted, the background takes up about 50% of the artwork. When you look at the reference photo, it's roughly 50%. I would even argue that maybe the background is like 55 or pushing 60%. So that means the background's very important. If half of the artwork is the background. You can't suggest that the background is not important. It's 50% of the project. Of course, it's important. Um, the irony is, I think that you spent too much time on the background here because you put all these little intricacies, all these little bits of water and reflection and different shadows and shapes, and I see where you pulled them from, but you gave a blurry background more than it had in the first place. So if I were to just take the background, actually, I'm going to just duplicate this, and then I'm going to do my favorite thing, which is just to blur until I feel like the background is blurry. So sure, about there. I'm even going to darken this. I'm trying to think about, maybe I'll just, no, that's not how I want to do it. Maybe I'll just use layers. So let's do exposure. Sure. Just the bottom layer there. So I'm going to darken that. And now I will add this. And I'll just bring back Golem here. And I'll just have a darker background. A darker plus blurrier background. So that's what my goal is. Because the background is important, as I said. It makes up 50%, if not more, of the artwork. The problem is that it's also far too distracting because you have more details than the original. And I should maybe bring the reference photo back too. So you have a lot more details and texture and things that don't exist in the background. And what that does is it has that competing texture. So the background is competing with the foreground subject. And now that the background it's still there, it's still very important, but now it's like pushed away, and now you focus right on Smeagol. And then of course you introduce uh, the the light. So you've pushed the background away, you've blurred it, you don't have any of that unnecessary texture, unnecessary details. It's just a blurry blob in the back that nobody wants to pay any attention to. Now your pinpoint focus is right there on your main subject. And then also establishing the light. Now the main subject pops out. It has that three-dimensional look, and the background is non-distractive. So I just sort of erased the background but kept it there in a meaningful way, which is what the blurry background is supposed to do. It's supposed to enhance the main subject, not distract you from it. And so, anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about on this one, Megan. You have a good foundation. Now you just need to learn the intricacies of playing with the light, playing with the subject matter, and controlling that depth um, in order to know how to tell your viewer what you want them to look at. And here in this case, the subject is obviously what you want them to look at. All right. So let me just group that. All right. And then Megan's second project was the I'm forgetting that prairie dog. I wanted to call it a meerkat, but it's a prairie dog. Here I think you did a fantastic job. A lot of really great texture, like beautiful fur texture. Really, really great fur texture. Love the color dynamics here. I know that it doesn't totally match the color ranges in the reference photo, but I like it. I like that you sort of played around with the colors. You have good contrast, good cast shadow. Like you have a lot of really good things going on here. I'd say the only thing you should work on is taking photo of the artwork so that I can see it better. I want to see it better because I think that it came out really good. It's just a little like slanted or whatever. It's no big deal. I'm just nitpicking. You did a good job though. For sure, the The texture looks great. There are some sort of strange pinch points. Um, like you have some fur texture going this way, and then it clashes with this fur texture, and it that's not totally anatomically correct with the prairie dog, but that's okay. It doesn't stick out too much. It's just a couple things. The fur down here, remember it sort of does this because it's like the skin is bunching up, and so there's a little bit of a bump here as it transitions into the tail. The arm fur, this part here looks a little off. It looks like the fur is sort of doing this, which it shouldn't. Maybe not so much there, but it sort of changes direction. So there's a few spots in here where the fur direction gets a little off, but other than that, I think that it looks really good. Um, Great bold outline. I would say that like up at the top of the head, one second. Up at the top of the head, you have some nice flyaways of the white coming off, creating that silhouetted rim light with the fur texture. But then down here, I don't see any of that. And you should maybe a little bit here. It's kind of difficult on this colored paper and the lighting. But yeah, I would have liked to see a little bit more hair texture coming off the back as well, just like you have on the top of the head, just to create not a smooth outline, but the fur texture continuing all the way down the back. But aside from that, very good job. All right, now we have the monthly masteries. So it's grading time. Thanks again, everybody, for the artwork submissions. The really good job. I love seeing the stuff, and I hope that my input has been helpful up to this point. All right, so this is Cherry's monthly mastery number 9. Looking very, very good. Super crispy lines. My goodness, look at these edges, especially on the pyramid here and the dome. This intersection between the red, orange, and yellow. Yeah, those lines are super crispy. You know, this drawing looks kind of big. Like you drew it bigger to to allow yourself to get those really crispy lines. Yeah, they look really good. They look very sharp, very, very sharp. Um, so definitely good on the drawing precision. Very good. So let's have a look at the colors. The colors look pretty good. The shadow on the yellow, the shadow on the yellow is a tough one. It is a tough one. You're a little off there for sure. A little too light in the shadow on the pyramid. A little too light shadow on the dome and the sphere. So it could be the photograph. So I have leniency there, but they do look a little light. Other than that, yeah, the colors look pretty good. Good job on the table color. Like the table color is just about perfect. The shadow is a little bit light and a little bit too red in the back. Should be a little bit more of a neutral dark brown slash gray, but yeah, it's still pretty close. Especially like in the transition. Like in the transition, you're more of a transition color in the back where you should be closer to black actually, because it is rather dark. This color is actually closer to the actual background. This shadow color. All right, so let's just grade the colors really quick. So here's the face of the pyramid. This color looks, yeah, this looks pretty close, especially the upper part, sort of here, pretty close to that. Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a passing color. Now this the shadow I said was just a little bit too light, not quite dark enough. You'll see the shadows a bit more contrast, so still passing grade. I'd say like B minus for that shadow. The dome looks great. Like this color looks really good for the light. Look at that. You have a little bit more yellow, but that could just be from the pixel. Yeah, so you have the yellow here, but you transition to the more orange. Yeah, so there we go. That's a little bit better indication. So that's definitely an A plus. You have the transitionary color, which is that more vibrant orange. Sorry, that's the wrong. This is the more vibrant orange. Yours looks a little bit less saturated, but still very close. And then the shadow, I'm going to get your darkest part here just to judge it best versus the darkest part here. You can see again, still a little bit of space there to go darker, but definitely still a passing grade. It's the correct tone. So you have the correct hue with that red. You just need to go a little bit darker. So like B, yeah, a B here for the shadow. Now the cone, it's difficult. This is a bit too bright and too light. So you're bright and light, light and undersaturated. Actually, that's a better way of putting it. You're too bright and you're too undersaturated. Look at the vibrancy here. It's like the most vibrant yellow in the set, exception of the neon. So you're a little bit too light. This color's pretty far off. I'd probably give it like a maybe a D, because the color is very like it's you have more yellow, you also have more white, so you're less saturated and you're off on the value quite a bit. And the shadow has this greenish tone, which you did get the green. Sorry, wrong color again. So you have the greenish tone, but again, the value is just too bright. But you have the correct hue, unlike the light. The light, you're off on hue and value. Here, you have the correct hue, but just the wrong value. So this is passing grade, probably a C plus. This rectangular prism looks very good. The color looks great. That looks like spot on. I mean, the value, depending on where I pick, a little bit tricky, but for the light, I mean, that's super good. This square here could be a little bit like this shadow part should be a little bit more towards this. I'm going to use this shadow since I think it's closer. Yeah, very, very good shadow. See, the shadow's there. See, it's the same color. Here you have this dark and then you have this light. So you can see the difference. You should have used the same method for that cast shadow for this shadow here, and it would have been better. Now this shadow looks a little bit blue, but it's close enough. Yeah, it's definitely close enough. So no big deal. This definitely an A for the rectangular prism. Now the sphere is a tricky one because you have the bright spot, which leans towards the yellow. So it's a little bit more of a French gray than just a neutral gray that you have. But still totally passing, because what really makes the difference with the sphere is the yellow transition, which I think you captured wonderfully. Yeah, just like perfect. About here-ish, I'd say. Yeah, like perfect transition. However, the shadow looks a little light. Like it, try to grab the darkest gray, and then you'll see how much green you're missing. The shadow has a lot of green, partially due to the subtle reflection of the green, but also just the environment that I took the picture. The live stream's still good, right? Nobody has said anything in a while, or I messed it up somehow. Did I mess up the chat? I hope I didn't miss, like, doesn't even scroll. Oh no. Is everything good? Hold on, I'm refreshing. Now I don't see any of the chat. I don't see if anybody's typing. Still good? Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. Yeah, my chat window, I think it froze. So I hope I didn't miss any questions or anything. Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, please interrupt me. All right. So yeah, the sphere, I in spite of that, like the transition color is one of the hardest to get. So I'd still give you like a C, solid C on the sphere. It's C plus, B minus kind of range. Now the tabletop, definitely one of the more difficult colors. And I think that you captured it like magnificently. Like, you just need to get the right pixel. Hold on a second. Yeah, that's better. And then maybe something like that. So it's very close. Yeah, it's very close. Just there we go. That's the pixel. Yeah, just a little bit lighter. The transition here um, is pretty close. You have more saturation in your transition, which I mentioned at the beginning, and then your shadow, it has a little bit more red. It's creating that brownish color, and it should be just a little bit more neutral. This shadow here, I think, is actually closer. Yeah, this one's just blue. This one's red, but the back the background should just be more neutral in general, less saturation and just a darker value. So your total grade, I would say, cleanliness of the lines, good coverage, really good on the colors. Um, let's see then. The cone definitely knocks off quite a bit. Yeah, the cone was the worst part, I think. But like accuracy is still good. I'm gonna say B plus. Yeah, this is solid B plus. The yellow's tricky. The sphere is tricky. Um, but obvious places to yeah, pick the wrong browns. That's okay. B plus just means uh like there's just a few details, right? There's just a few details, and then you clean that up, and then you're pulling A's for the rest of the year. It's very, very solid. I have to be strict with the monthly masteries because, you know, they're first off monthly masteries, right? They're supposed to be simple projects. You don't have to draw them real big or anything. And it's all about technique. It's, we're not trying to create masterpieces for the monthly masteries. It's all about technique. And you're definitely on the right track. Compared to your previous monthly masteries, you're on an upward trajectory, and that's what we want to see. That's what we want to see. That's where it's at. If you were to do the monthly mastery perfect, like from day one, then I would argue you are wasting your time, right? If you're doing them perfectly from day one, just do artwork. Don't worry about, perfecting the technique. You've already perfected it if you're doing it perfect every time. But you've progressively gotten better. So that's a B plus is a solid grade. Up next is Linda. And oh, again, look at this line. I gotta zoom in just to appreciate that line. Look at that. Jeez, it's almost pixel perfect zooming in like 1,000 times. That's a sharp, clean line right there. I like to see that. I'd like to see that on your sphere over here. What happened over here? Did your ruler break, Linda? No, I'm just kidding. It looks great. Um, all right. So, yeah, the shapes look good. The colors look fantastic too. Goodness. The background, yeah, still the background. Maybe it's just my screen. Maybe it's my reference on my screen. Does the background seem that much lighter? Like you have this really dark value down here. Um, that's not a dark value at all. Hold on a second. You have this nice dark value, and it's the same. It's the same dark value. So why is this value not as dark as that? Why does it keep doing that? Yeah. Anyways, sorry, getting way off topic here. Can't find a circle big enough? Ah, I see. I see. Can't find it. Yeah. Um, I don't know how to tell you about that. Make one. If you have any cardboard, like the not like the double ply corrugated cardboard stuff, but like from the cover or the backing of the pastel mat, like the gummed pads, like that kind of cardboard, that compressed tight cardboard. Just trace the circle, or if you can't trace the circle, do you know how to use your hand as a compass? So I'll just briefly demonstrate. I think, hold on a second. And transition. All right. So if you have your hand like this, like say this is the surface of the paper, put your wrist here, have the paper movable. Hold your hand and just spin the paper and use your hand as a compass. So as you spin the paper, it will spin right on that bone there in a circle. This might take a little bit of practice. You can also use knuckles. So you can set a knuckle on the paper. Your hand's going to be a little awkward, right? And then you just spin the paper and you'll get a perfect circle. And so you can find the radius and then spin the paper and create a perfect circle. Let me transition back really quick. There we go. All right. So yeah, you don't need a compass. You have a hand. Anyways, sorry about that. Hopefully that somebody will find that helpful. Uh, yeah, so you don't want to poke a hole in your paper. Well, use a scrap piece of paper, transfer the circle, just like you do your artwork or do your line work. So draw the correct size circle on scrap paper, then transfer it, because your tracing of a perfect circle will always be better than your sketching of a perfect circle. Problem solved. No hole in your paper, and if you use a compass on a piece of cardboard, like the cardboard that I described, just cut it out. Just, draw the perfect circle with the compass and then very carefully cut that circle out. And there you go. You have your correct size circle. Anyways, let's grade these colors because they look very, very good. Here's the red. That one looks a little bit bright. Tiny bit. Still very good. This one is the pyramid. What's with the shadow color of the pyramid? Everybody sees how dark that is, right? Like I'm not going crazy. Everybody sees how dark this dome is too, right? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I pulled the wrong color there. That's very close. I need to grab the right color. Yeah, that's very close. Shadow, I'm just gonna go for the darkest here. Match it with the darkest. Yes, I mean the distinction is pretty obvious when you have the colors right next to each other. Um, Looking at it is a whole nother story. That definitely can be a problem. But look at this line. Like I know it's a gradient, but oh, 1 second. My upstairs neighbors are banging on the ceiling. So there's like this line here, right? Everybody can see that, right? Where the gradient and the light is separating. Where's the line? Make sure you make sure you establish those shadows. Even if the gradient isn't perfectly soft, right? It's still better to clearly separate light from shadow. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Spheres and rounded surfaces are difficult, which is why in the very beginning, I didn't include them. We worked our way up to the gradient, both with the non-colored monthly masteries and now the colored ones. So we just added color this year. And if you look back, a monthly mastery 13, 14, maybe 15, I think just 13 and 14. So January and February, I didn't involve rounded surfaces because I didn't want you to do gradients yet with color. Just like in monthly mastery like 1, 2, and 3, There wasn't any gradients. It was just flat surfaces. Um, and so as soon as you introduce gradients, you have that separation that you still need to establish, but it's much more arbitrary because it's a gradient and it's not separated by a clean edge. Um, the shadow on the pyramid didn't look that dark. Okay, well, I mean, I do give some leeway to color matching, but I mean, that I can't fake because that is just directly from the reference, not my perception. Um, all right, so the yellow looks good. Very nice saturation here on the light. Oh yeah, that is very good. That's a good cone right there. Got the nice touch of green. Let me get this darker. Maybe like here-ish. This darker green. It's a little bit closer. This part of the shadow is just a touch too light. Um, you're closer here in this like darker gradient. You're actually closer on the darker spot than the lighter spot to the lighter spot on the main part. So this part actually needs to be a little bit darker. The color that you created right here, you have like this really dark part, then you move into this transition dark green into this lighter green, and it's this darker green here that is actually closer to the correct color of what you would expect here. But you're just too light on this part. But you got the color. So your cone is quite good. This color looks pretty close too. Yeah, that's the, I mean, this color, for some reason, everybody nails this. Everybody nails this color. Some of the shadows gets a little bit darker here, but you're pretty close. Yeah, I mean, very, very close. This color here, probably closer. Yeah, your color here is a little light. This color is a little bit light. This color doesn't exist. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. Yeah, so this color that you have on this little section of light, it just straight up doesn't exist. It's lighter than anything in the reference on this particular shape here. Um, shadow looks good. Yeah, shadow looks good. All right, let's do the sphere. This is basically a pure white. You have a nice touch of yellow in there. That's good. Yeah, that's spot on. Transitionary color. So we got the yellow. Yeah, you got the yellow here. Very, very nice. I grabbed the wrong pixel. Probably closer to like that. There we go. Shadow looks good too. Got a bit of variation here, so I'm going to grab this one and compare it here. Again, there is that hint of green in the shadow. But overall, your sphere, yeah, your sphere's good. Good separation between light and shadow right here. Just need to do that on the dome as well. You did it on the cone, so the sphere and the cone are good. Tabletop looks good. Like this color looks very good. Very, very good. Transition color looks very, very good. And the back color, I'm just going to grab the darkest color here. Even though it still feels a little bit lighter, like it's still good. Like you did the background good, so don't stress about that or anything. Yeah, the tabletop, you might have the best tabletop slash background actually, as far as color accuracy. Yeah, working out. See, that's the other part with the monthly masteries is working out the mixtures. The more you do it, the more you work with the mixtures, the more intuitive you become about which colors mix to make what. Because as I have described in the past, 90% of the time, yeah, 98 actually, I think is what I said. 98% of the time, you are going to mix two colors only to get the color that your goal is. You only 98% of the time, which means as soon as you add a third color, you're in the 2 percentile of sort of that color sphere because we have 150 colors in the full set of Prisma. And I'm not suggesting that you have to use the full set of Prisma. Even if you were to use just the 72 pack of Prisma or the 24 pack of Polychromos, it doesn't matter which colors you use. But of course, as your library of pencil selection grows, which let's face it, it always does, um, you're going to have access to so many colors that the range of colors that you can create just grows exponentially. Like it grows ridiculously fast. It's n squared minus n, how many colors you create. So um, if you have 60 colors and you square that, that's like 360 minus 60. So 300 colors, distinct colors. And what I mean by that is you take any color and a second color and you do it, you mix it 50-50. That doesn't even include the infinite variation of, you know, 90% this color, 10% this color, 91% color of this, of color A, and 9%, and so forth. So you have an infinite potential just between, theoretically, between two colors. So when you extrapolate that out, I'm going to stop talking about math now. Diane gets it. Uh, anyways, um, so your grade. Yeah, let's do the grade now. Let's see. Almost all the colors, very, very close. Very close on all of the colors. There's just a few shadows that need to be a bit darker. Um, Cleanliness on lines, getting there. Complaining about not having the perfect circle. That doesn't fly. Um, I have to give this one an A minus. An A minus. Your colors are very accurate. Your values inherently in that color accuracy very good. There's a couple shadows, couple colors that just need to be very finely tuned. So there's not a lot of correction that would even be necessary in that regard. And then just a little bit of precision with the edges. You know, that's about it. There's not a lot left to improve on here. So paper is covered. The consistency of the colors look good. The reflections, the gradients, all of that stuff looks really, really solid. So you want to get to that um, illustrious A plus, then just tighten up a few of those last little details and you're there. Fantastic job, Linda. Everybody is significantly improving on the monthly masteries, like just by leaps and bounds from last month. Just significant. All right, this one is Margaret's monthly mastery, and so everything, yeah, this looks good. Now there's obvious things that don't, but overall, it is good. Like values on the background, the tabletop color looks very good. The general color of the objects looks pretty close. So let's just grade the edge cleanliness is pretty solid. There's a few little nicks here and there on the edges that are not great, but overall, I'd say the line sharpness is solid, very solid. So let's just grab some of the colors. What is happening? This is, oh, that's why I was on the eraser. I was like, why do I keep erasing? Do. All right, so this color looks pretty good. It's a little bit vibrant. You have a little bit of extra vibrancy in the red. Now, I'm not sure if you It may be the screen that you looked at, but the shadow, there is no shadow on your pyramid, which is a problem because there should be a shadow. So your shadow is missing on the pyramid. The color on the dome here, at least the light, looks very good. So you're getting the light colors very closely. But again, you're sort of missing the shadow, like the shadow on the dome. Now on the cone here, I don't even see the shadow separation. Um, I'm just gonna grab that. That's the light, and that looks pretty good. Like the color accuracy in the lights in your shape so far are very good. They're very good. Now the shadow, this you have this cast shadow here, which is not bad. You have that touch of green. It's a little bit more of a dirty yellow than a green. And the shadow is, I think nobody's going to argue that that's green. It's just a yellow green, is all. Yours is a little bit more of a brownish yellow. So you're leaning more towards brown as opposed to green, which is the actual color of the shadow on the cone. And so, again, your shadow's not where you want to be. This color, I can already tell you, is way, way too bright. But in the light, again, you're not too far off in the light. It's just it's just the shadows that are sort of eating your grade away here. Now this cast shadow is good, but light it's a little bit too light still, but it's close. It's close. And just like I mentioned on Linda's, was it Linda's? I don't remember. No, Linda's looks good. Cherry? Is it cherry? Yeah, so these shadows are the same, right? So these shadows should look the same. So this color should be here because it's also shadow. You can see the shadow. And when I look, like these colors are very similar. Um, so that should be the same. There's no real shadow going on. There's just this cast shadow. And then same thing on the sphere, like the light is good. Like you have it's hard to get this part wrong. It's kind of a gimme, but you are missing the yellow. So this yellow transition, I can already tell is blue. Like if I try to, that's about as close as I can get to yellow. It's a little bit greenish. And then again, you have blue. You have a cool gray, which again is not, sorry, I have these mixed. There we go. So again, the shadow's just not dark enough anywhere. Now the background looks good. The background color, very solid. The tabletop color looks great. Even the texture, I don't know if you did that texture on purpose, but the texture actually looks really good. Um, and the tabletop color is very, very close. So in general, all of the lights look very good. So you're really good at matching colors. You're just really bad at seeing shadows. I'm not I'm just joking a little bit, but you're missing the shadows, which you absolutely would crush this project. You would completely just do amazing if you also match the colors in the shadows. So just remember to identify light versus shadow, capture the color for both. Because if you can match the lights as well as you did, then you would get an A if you also matched the shadows as well as you did the lights. Because everything here was executed really well. And nearly all of the light colors, the colors in the light, were like A material, but the shadows are either non existent or just they're not, the colors aren't accurate. So um, that's where I want to see you go for the next monthly mastery, Margaret, is I want you to uh, identify the light and the shadow and then accurately match the shadow colors as well as you do the lights. For your grade, um, at this stage, this is monthly mastery 19, and establishing light and shadow is all the way back to monthly mastery 1. that I have to unfortunately give you a D plus for this one, because the light is the most important part. If you don't get the colors, if you get all the colors wrong, like if your sphere is yellow, your cone is green, and your dome is purple, if you got the values right, it's still a passing grade. It's still a passing grade because it's the values that matter most. So capturing that light is the most important thing. You're so good on the color matching for the lights, but where are the shadows? So I have to give you a D on it because we've been establishing the light from the very first monthly mastery. And so you can't not do that on monthly mastery 19 and get a C or higher. So that's the only reason. Um, all right, moving on to Diane's. Um, this looks good. Yeah, this looks good. Let's just, I only have what? One more. So Diane and then Megan. So let's just breeze through this really quick. Everything looks good. Sharpness is pretty consistent all over. Yeah, the sharpness looks pretty good everywhere. The sphere, everybody has a problem with circles apparently. It looks it just a little off in comparison to like the pyramid. Even the dome looks pretty clean around the dome, and it looks very circular. There's just a few flat spots on the sphere. I'm gonna give everybody a hard time on the sphere because Linda wanted to complain about not having a compass and putting holes in her paper. so so everybody blame Linda for that one. All right, let's double check the colors. The colors look pretty good just from eyeballing really quickly. Oops, I grabbed the wrong color. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. This color looks a little light, but I could be wrong. Yeah, it's just a touch light, but it's very close. This looks like it might be missing some yellow. Just a hint. Just a hint. I'll try to pull a better pixel here. Yeah, it's just missing a hint of yellow on the highlight. The transitionary color looks good. Nice and vibrant orange. Yes, very good. And the shadow looks great. Oh yeah, that is the color right there. That is a good looking shadow. This one I pulled a little bit too red. Hold on a second. Let me see here. Yeah, it is. It is really a bit more red, but still very close. Cannot ding you for that. This yellow looks a little muddy. What is that? Maybe it's just this shadow, the roughness of that shadow. Yeah, it is a little muddy. The light here is a little muddy. It's a little bit too greenish. A bit more of a clean yellow. Again, the shadow looks, it's green, but it doesn't look dark enough. Hold on. Oops. Mixing up my buttons here. All right, let's see. Let's see. Okay, maybe I'm off. No, it's yeah, it's a little bit darker. It's still a little bit darker. This shadow is a little rough. That one's a little rough. I'm not even really sure which pixel to grab. And this here is the more dirty yellow as opposed to the green. So not totally accurate with the color mixing. So this is where you might have used brown or something instead of a green. Let me see what color. 1096. Yeah, like 1096 maybe. So like 915 plus 1096 in the Prismacolors is what I probably would have started off with. These colors look good. Yeah, these colors look good. Oh, let me grab the brighter one. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yes. Very accurate there. The sphere looks, oops, wrong order. Yeah, sphere looks good. Yellow is a little greenish. Yellow's a little greenish, which the shadow color, you did get the green here. I'm seeing the green, the first person to get the green. Not dark enough, but you do have green. Yeah, sometimes, sometimes the paper or the solvent, it sort of muddies things up in some regard. So don't worry about it. I totally understand. It's finicky. It is finicky. Now background looks good as well. I mean, I grabbed a grayish color. And then the table, yeah, the table also looks good. I know I gave you all so much stress over matching the table because I talked about how difficult it is to match this color. Because this khaki color is really difficult to capture because there's not a pencil that really, there's not a singular pencil that like kind of captures both the color and the value, and so you always have to like find that combination. But very very close, I'd say. um, I think this is a pretty easy A minus as well, just like Linda's. The maybe you changed papers, and that's why why can I not, am I on the brush? For some reason I can't change my brush size with the shortcut keys. Yeah, so this is another A minus. Very good. I mean, nearly all of the colors are as close as you can get. There's a little bit of missing yellow in the transition on the sphere, um, but you got the green in the shadow. So you sort of, probably blending, you covered up the yellow a bit too much with the green. But the roughness, so there's that bit of roughness um, in the colors, which uh, can happen. It can happen. It sometimes it's a little bit out of our control, but overall, oh sorry, I put it an A plus there. Is my keyboard not working? Hold on a second. My keyboard is working. Photoshop, what are you doing? Yeah, it's working, but nothing is working. Sorry. Um, Good thing this is the end because yeah, this is A minus. So just a little bit of precision around the edges and then the smoothness, and that's where you can improve. Otherwise, very, very good. This one is Megan. And so Megan, I haven't seen a monthly mastery from you before. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on knowing what the monthly mastery is meant to be explicitly. And that is, well, first off, if you haven't done any of the previous monthly masteries, I would highly recommend you start there and then build your way up. A few of the monthly masteries, um, I did video tutorials and I explained things in detail so that you don't have to guess, because the monthly mastery is not a reference photo that I want you to copy. And I can tell that you took the reference photo and you sort of like try to follow the edges in the, like the folds and the wrinkles in the cloth and the background and stuff like that. None of that's relevant. The monthly masteries are about um, drawing precisely. Your perspective is off here a little bit. It's drawing accurately, sharply, full coverage of the paper. So um, making sure you take your time and you smooth everything out and you get it as smooth as you possibly can. With this year moving into color, last year we didn't use any color. It was all about like the really fine point fundamentals, establishing light, identifying light first off, and then accurately drawing our shapes and filling those things in with clean edges, full coverage, and accurate values. Now that we're in color, we're doing all of those things, but now we're matching colors. And here, your colors are not wildly inaccurate, but you definitely want to take more time. You don't need to do the whole reference photo. So you can just focus in on the shapes. You don't have to do like unnecessary areas of the background. Like all of this space is just a waste of your time. Focus on the main part. So you want to draw these shapes very accurately. You want nice, crisp, sharp edges. You want to establish shadow and light and then match those colors and then create your gradients and reflections and highlights. So maybe go back to Monthly Mastery 13 if you want to stick with color. Do those ones and then work your way up. You do not by any means have to do the monthly masteries within the same month that I do the live critiques. So just because monthly mastery 20 is available doesn't mean you should do monthly mastery 20. You should do monthly mastery 1 if you want to go back that far, or you can go back as far as you feel comfortable, but definitely don't feel pressured to do the current monthly mastery because that's not the way that it's set up. It's set up to progressively get more complex and difficult. And so do that. Just want to clarify that. But anyways, that is the last project that we have today. Here, maybe I'll switch. There we go. So I'll switch to the big webcam or face cam. So anyways, thank you guys so much for all of the submissions. Great submissions this month for sure. Excellent progression on the monthly masteries. Everybody is clearly getting better with the monthly masteries. And that's all you would want to hear. Trust me. The fact that you're getting better, now you can take those techniques that you're working on, find the ways to fine tune them, and apply them also to your original artwork and to the other art club projects because you're finding the colors, matching the colors, finding the shadows, finding the lights. Now, just as you practice these things, they will become second nature. You'll just see light in your reference photos and in your artwork, and you'll be able to maximize where the light is, establishing the light. Everything's just going to get better from there. So a majority of people don't put the time in to deepen their understanding on these very fundamental things. And because of that, they stay within the range of mediocrity for years. For years, they'll just be basic artists. Anybody can pick up a pencil and scribble some things and get better in a month. The difference is whether or not you skip the fundamentals. And the monthly masteries just are the focus of the fundamentals. And as you get better at those very basic things, you're just going to inherently start introducing them to your everyday artwork, into your big projects. And it's going to elevate your work right out of the mediocrity stage. And a majority of people are stuck there. A majority of people, a vast majority. I'd say it's like 90%. Like 90% of people that want to, do art stuff, create colorful pictures and stuff, they almost never get out of the mediocrity stage. And it's not saying that their work is bad or undesirable. It's just that they've never taken the time to master the basic stuff in order to naturally elevate their big projects, the stuff that they're passionate about. So as you get better with the monthly masteries, everything gets better from there on out. So fantastic job, and hope you enjoyed the live stream. I'll see you guys on Monday, and we'll continue the pastel project. So have a fantastic Friday, have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday. Take care. Peace.